Hi there, this is Paula from Replicon. Groups are customizable categories available in our enterprise products. They are similar to basic department and employee type categories in that you can use them to organize users, but groups are much more powerful than those basic categories. In this video, I'm going to explain what groups are and why you might want to use them. Then I'll show you how to set them up. Groups are powerful because you can use them to limit administrator, payroll manager, project manager, and schedule manager access to users and projects. For example, if you set up a group for each of your organization's locations, say New York, London, and Sydney, you can allow one payroll manager to access only employees in Sydney. That is, they'll only be able to view and process payroll data for individuals based in your Sydney office. Then you can allow another manager to process payroll for employees in New York and another for London. Or, say you have two service centers in your organization, one in Houston and one in Calgary. You can assign projects to each of these centers and then limit a project manager's access to one service center or the other. Also, once users are set up in groups, project managers can assign whole groups of users to a project in one step, just as they can assign whole departments. Another feature of groups is that, unlike departments and employee types, when you assign them to a user, you can set an effective date. So when you process payroll, and you filter by groups, for example, you'll know exactly what users were included in your pay run. Finally, you can use groups as a supplement to the department and employee type categories, or if you want to filter access based on those categories, you can recreate them using groups. Restricting data access in your system has a few benefits. It allows global level access to those who need it, alongside local limited access for those who only need to act locally, all within one system. It allows you to protect confidentiality and security, since employees won't see data they don't need access to. It makes it easier for administrators and managers to work with data, since the data set they're exposed to is smaller. And it limits the potential for errors, since users have access to less data to make errors with. There are 3 steps to setting up groups in Replicon: create your groups, assign users to groups, assign access privileges. There are 4 group types available by default in enterprise-level products: locations, divisions, cost centers, and service centers. But you can rename these to meet your requirements, or disable one or more of them if you don't need 4 types of groups in your system. For each type of group, you can create a set of groups to assign users to. So, with the example I used earlier, you could create New York, London, and Sydney groups under the locations group type. Note that groups can be hierarchical. That is, you can create subgroups under groups, like making the Sydney group a subgroup of an Australia group in the locations hierarchy. Note that the locations group type is available in non-enterprise products, but in those products you can't rename it and you can't use it to limit access. You'd need an enterprise product license to do that. Once you have your groups in place, you can assign them to users using the Groups page in User Profiles. Simply choose which group the user belongs to for each type. Here's where you set the effective date for the group assignment, which I talked about earlier. You can also mass edit users to make assigning groups faster. If you're limiting access to projects, you'll need to assign projects to groups on the project info page for each project. Finally, once groups are assigned, you need to limit group access privileges by role. To limit access, go to the Roles and Permissions page in User Profiles. When you assign a permission set for one of these types, the payroll manager role for example, access controls become visible. As I mentioned, you can limit access for the administrator or the payroll project or schedule manager roles. As you can see, by default, this manager has access to all users in all groups. Click Restrict Access to choose which groups they can view and work with for each group type you've set up. that is, for locations, divisions, etc. As an example, I'll limit this manager's access to Sydney only. So now when I log in as that payroll manager, I'll only see employees based in Sydney in the application. Note that if the group is a hierarchy and you assign a parent group, the user will have access to all subgroups under that parent group, even if the checkboxes aren't checked. Also note that you can add additional rows to create access combinations. For example, I might want an administrator to see the finance group in all company locations, but HR employees only from Toronto. So I'd have to create 2 rows to set up those restriction combinations. And that's how groups work in Replicon. If you need more information, visit Replicon's help system at www.replicon.com/help. Post a question in our community, or contact Replicon support. That's all from me for now. Thanks for your time.